Welcome to another episode of Mindful City, Tuning into Life, a podcast that brings you an intimate exploration of the businesses, practitioners, and artists making an impact in our community. Join us on Patreon for an exploration of all the people, places, and things that raise consciousness in our community by telling us about the businesses and happenings you'd like to know more about, and we'll explore them for you. Thank you, and welcome to another episode of Mindful City, Tuning into Life. I am delighted today because my guest is Estrella Lastre, and we met actually, several years ago. And we met in a community garden. And the community garden, I actually moved from one place. I was in a city. I was living in kind of like those apartment complexes that are studio-like. And so there wasn't not even a balcony. There wasn't anything like that. I was living in South Tampa, and I joined a community garden there. And then I moved to Oldsmar and had the same situation where I couldn't plant. And I remember how important that experience was for me and how grounding, first of all, being in the earth and just working with plants, but also the learning aspect of it and then the community part of it. And you were a big part of teaching me that and, giving me the right information and helping me with my little lot. And as the years have gone by, I have myself had way much more interest in the community gardens, how they get started, how the community is receiving them and things that are happening. And I've actually been talking to you for a while, telling you that I wanted to bring you on the show here and there. And so I'm just so happy to finally have you on the show. So welcome.
Hi. Yes. Thanks for having me.
So I told you also before we started the call, I'm not so good with introductions, and I really feel that people can tell their story better than I can. So I'm curious, how did you get into gardening per se, your love for plants and community gardens? And tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing right now.
Of course. So I was born and raised in Florida, and there really isn't anyone in my family who gardens. That wasn't something I was exposed to when I was growing up. I did always like nature, and I always loved animals. I had countless amount of pets. And so when I was my first year of college, I had my first garden. But I wouldn't so much call it a garden. I was doing you'll see nowadays now, we didn't have Instagram back then, but you would see, if you put your celery or if you put your carrots, you can regrow the tops. And I mean, if it's your first time seeing that when you're, or trying it out, it's like magic. So my first garden really, I would say, was just, like a science lab for me. And then it was also the same thing where I didn't have anywhere to really grow food. So you're doing the windowsills and you're doing your random pieces of light that you can find inside. And my first actual gardening outside was at a friend's house. And that grew into any friend who had some grass, that was Star's garden. And I was just planting things at people's homes. And even then it wasn't you couldn't really get a yield from it. One tomato plant is fine. You can get a few tomatoes, toss it into a salad, take some photos, be really proud. But you're not making yourself a home meal.
Yeah.
And maybe about 6 years ago is when I moved to Oldsmar and had a piece of land that was big enough to really give this a try, somewhere I was going to be every day and could give it the attention it deserved. And so I started gardening outside, and I would redo the plot as I would learn, where the sun is at and how that doesn't make sense to grow this with that. And a lot of the things in my degree talk about citizen engagement and how the best way that you can create change is in your own community. It is very easy to say that you want to change the world and make it a better place. And you can do that by starting first in your home and then kind of spreading that love outward and really trying to connect with your community and not necessarily change their mind, but show them that there's a different way and let them make the decision. And so as I started kind of, taking over my home property, but also having this desire to make a bigger difference, I looked into community gardens. And what do you know, Helen? There's a community garden 2 minutes away. And so that I had never been to that side of town. It's, I'm a homebody. And So down I traveled 2 minutes away, and I'm also someone who likes to plan. So, like I said, I used to redo the plots in the house, and I would do drawings and sketches of like what this could look like and look up what those trees look like when they're mature. And so all that planning. And I went to the community garden, and the gate was locked and nobody was there. And there was so much empty green space. So my mind was just going crazy about like what you can
You're
do and
like
how you can utilize that
seeing
space
it
better.
exactly. Yeah.
And so I started doing some drawings right there, getting some ideas. And then I emailed the garden, told them, hey, I live close by. I have some ideas for you. And I met with the president and vice president. It was a husband and wife at the time. And they were, I think, very overwhelmed by how much I was presenting to them and how I was explaining, what we could do to get these things done and, just ideas. But I think coming to the table with that type of energy and passion um, is what made them ask me to come to a meeting that was happening later that week.
Mhm.
I show up at that meeting, and that's where they tell all the members that they're moving, husband and wife. So they are both moving. But we think that we found someone who can replace us as president. And they asked me to stand up, and they're like, so, we met Star recently, less than a week ago. So we met Star recently, and we think that she would make a great president. And there I got voted in. And
That's
I think the rest
awesome.
is history.
Yes, because that's when, and I got to meet you. It's interesting because you were just telling me about that. When you were talking about environmental policy, I was thinking it's not just environment, because I know that's what you study.
Mhm.
It's not just environment as an earth only, right? We're
Yes.
thinking you're talking a little bit more even about the community environment and things of that nature. So within that realm and within that aspect, how do you see community garden and its position, in our environment?
Of course. So while the word environment is an environmental policy, it is mostly based around people
Hmm.
and, how our businesses can impact the people they serve while also keeping in mind the ecosystems that we're going into, and how do we make the future a more equitable future for everyone, not just
Mhm.
the ecosystems, not just a select group of people or one business. And so there's a lot of research that supports that community gardens are a great tool for bringing communities together, for creating stronger social ties within each other. There's health benefits with it because you're being more active, you're going to be eating healthier food. Healthier people are usually able to be more involved in their community. There's mental health benefits to being outside, to being around people, to connecting with nature. You can go almost into like the religious aspect of that, of this feeling more connected, like you're part of something.
Mhm.
And especially during COVID, a lot of people saw the joy of being able to garden. And so I bring that back to healthier and happier citizens are more likely to be more involved in the community that they are part of.
Mhm.
And a huge part of sustainability is citizen engagement. And how can you involve your citizens, your community members, to want to look into the programs we're offering, to give us their opinion on the programs we're offering, because it's not like your local government wants to make the choices for you, but we have choices to be made, and we need direction. And sometimes it's 4 or 5 people deciding what happens for thousands of people. um, so how community garden can play into that is that having the citizens who are more engaged then makes like a snowball effect into the things that they're going to be part of within their actual community outside of a garden.
Mhm. And it also doesn't stop there, because one of the things that I really enjoyed is the educational aspect of the community garden. So when you take that information, when you're learning there on your small plot,
Mhm.
there's some people that have more space at their home, and so they begin to also plant at home, and they begin to also learn and teach others and engage others. And so in some aspect, the changes continue, to go. I do know it's a lot of work. I have seen it firsthand. So I can't imagine just the amount of work that goes into it. What does it take to get a community garden started? What has been your experience, and what are some of the challenges?
Of course. So I think before I mention, what you can do to get a community started and the challenges, I would encourage, listeners and those interested in starting a community garden to do some research and see if there's already a community garden near you.
Mhm.
It's not just that you're splitting up resources or you're splitting up members, because that's important too, but there's almost more impact in putting your time, energy, and effort in progressing something that's already started. Think about like that snowball effect.
Mm.
And before you're having to start from scratch, and like I said, you're splitting resources, maybe you're trying to find sponsors who already sponsor a garden that's in town. um, I would think that joining one and improving the systems that they have in place, or encouraging the membership there by being an active member, almost adds more
Mhm.
to that idea than had you started from scratch. But some of the ideas you can keep in mind when you are starting a garden, because once again, I was fortunate to join a garden that was already existing, and so that's the same explanation I just provided is what I think I brought to the table there. And it gave
Mhm.
me the opportunity to work with an existing board that was in place. We had a bank account that had funding that I just had to improve on. I already had sponsors I could reach out to collaborate more on it. um, but originally, for the garden that we were part of, the use of the land and the water that was used there was provided by the city.
Mm.
And so that is a great starting place. You got land and water. Those are two great things. The sunlight's free. Um, the members at that time reached out to, I believe it was like a Lowe's that was nearby. And through some partnerships, it looks great for Lowe's as well. It's not like it just benefits the garden. They donated a fence.
Mm.
And so, they came out with volunteers along with the members, some city people. And so now they had water, they had a piece of land and a way to enclose it to kind of make it a place.
Mhm.
And it just goes from there. So I think a great way to get started is, I would say, at your own home, if that's already yours, a place that you already have access to, and start by sharing some of your own work. So if you're wanting to start a
Mhm.
garden, and you're right, you're gonna have to do some work. Say it's an herb garden, say it's 2 or 3 tomato plants, and invite your neighbors that you guys can go ahead and harvest from this too. And you almost like kind of grow outward from there. They can actually plant some stuff in there too if they want. From there, I would go to asking or seeing around in your community other people who are interested in a garden. It is wonderful that you want to start a community garden and that you have a list of reasons why it's great. But is there anyone already in your community? Because this isn't a city garden, it's a community one. Is there anyone
Mhm.
in your community who has the same interest? Because again, let's go back to step one, that if there's not, that's okay, but you can still join a garden. You can
Mhm.
drive 10 minutes to a garden that's around, there's not that demand right now where you're at in life,
Mhm.
or in place. And so if there is an interest in your community, whether it be that they're already gardening or that they've wanted to, just a curiosity for it,
Mhm.
you can take that citizen desire to your local government and express that a lot of our citizens are wanting to have a community garden. Is there a place where we could do this? And you can encourage individual citizens to raise this desire on their own. Maybe they can write a letter, they can phone in, and it's not like a protest, but it's showing that this isn't one person speaking for many.
Mhm.
We all want this. And even if the city, it's say 3 months, 6 months, it's not going anywhere, you can approach local businesses and see if you're able to start a garden there. I'm trying to give you options here so you see that
Mhm.
there's multiple routes to get there. I know a lot of time churches actually will have community gardens. Sometimes it's just it's the congregation who will take care of it, but if someone from the outside is willing to help us get this started, yes, our members will participate in it, but others will as well. It's
Mhm.
a very welcoming community. And so, businesses, churches, sometimes schools. The problem with schools is going to be funding. So if someone's offering a way to put it, they just need a place. That's
Mhm.
another avenue, especially if your kids go to that school. So I think being creative with where you can have that garden will unlock a lot of, opportunities to have gardens where that feels like the hardest part. Where do I get started with it? So
Mhm.
let's find people, let's find a place, and then we'll worry about the how.
How to do it? Yeah. Well, going into a little bit the how, because part of it is the knowledge base. how to get to that. I was lucky to have you. I really didn't know. I also didn't grow up here, so I wasn't as familiar with the type of soil and the land and what will grow and what doesn't. Where do you go in educating yourself or educating the community? What do you recommend in terms of resources to do that?
Of course. So depending on your age, I mean, I'm a millennial, so depending on your age, books have so much knowledge. I mean, it was a resource that I'm like, did you know there's books at the library for free with all this? That's old news though. That's yeah, but
It's new news for some.
it's a resource that is often for me in my world untapped into, and there's just so much knowledge in there. With photos, which is great. Yes, there is the internet. Yes, there's cool things like Facebook and Instagram, which usually it's, this kind of like clickbait ideas of, grow the tomatoes. And yeah, you got the top to grow, cool, but that's you didn't get another tomato. You didn't get another carrot out of that. That works great with onions. Put your onion, cut that up and put that out in your garden, free onions again. But yeah, so a great one I would say is if you're in Florida, the University of Florida has so much research that they have done over the years, and it is specific to counties. So that is great. And for that, you would go to it's UF IFAS. So that's UFIFAS.
Okay.
And then you put your county. So UF IFAS, Pinellas, Hillsborough, Manatee. You put your county after that. And you'll see, yes, a lot of information about a wide variety of topics, whether how you're watering. A big one is right plant, right place. And it talks about watering habits, sun habits, the soil. But a major one for education is unlimited free classes that they offer. Most of the month there's classes available, and I can take classes, online or in person in another county. Usually, just having it in your county benefits you because it's very specific for the needs. And what they do a lot is if there's citizen interest, the same thing like I'm saying with your city, if there's a lot of citizen interest towards a certain topic, they will gear their classes towards that. They even have master gardener programs. So if you really have this interest, it's almost like you're going and you're getting a degree in gardening.
What is the master gardener again? Because I am familiar, I've heard it several times, but what is the process for that master gardener?
So I haven't gone through the courses myself, but you fill out an application. And I believe it's almost a year. I don't want to even misquote that, but basically over a period of time, you are taking classes with them in person usually, and it is educating you on how you can educate others. So kind of like the idea of when you go to get a degree, you go to, a college, you're taking certain courses, and the end goal is that you can go and be a productive member in society in that same topic. After you do graduate, they do have requirements of basically education of volunteer hours, teaching the knowledge that we taught you, and you're considered a master gardener. It's usually county based, and that you can do the courses basically for it. But overall, I believe your title is a Florida Master Gardener. They also have like naturalist programs for that as well.
And because one thing that's pretty important now, at least that I'm hearing from a lot of people, is to garden specifically to your area, which is what you're saying. Because I know that even, especially because I grew up elsewhere, you want to take those plants and you're like, you love those plants, so you want them here too. So what are some of the things these days that you see that are happening in terms of gardening, and some recommendations that you have for us? Yeah, tell me a little bit, like what's going on.
So when I mentioned right plant, right place, that is geared towards you having greater success, but also geared towards the environment. I can have a plant that I brought back from home and I potted in the ground here. And here in Florida, it's considered an invasive. So it's going to take over my garden. It's going to outcompete plants that I have here that maybe had an ecological benefit to it. And so you're really competing and almost, I would say, creating a negative effect. So a great way to avoid that, instead of having, what's native, what's invasive, what's okay to plant, is to go native. There are so many flowering plants, trees, shrubs, and that is also gardening. Gardening isn't all for food. that you can put into your yard. There's also lots of native edibles that you can put in to your yard, and that's also going to encourage biodiversity, which that a greater biodiversity is going to reduce the pests that you have in there, so you're not having to spray. Organic gardening is really taking off, and it used to be that you had to be like a health nut to want to have an organic garden. It was really easy to put Miracle Grow on everything. Tons of pesticides, herbicides, which is what large scale industry does. But when you start learning, and you'll get there in time, you only get better at it. I don't think that anyone has, what is it, a brown thumb or a black thumb. I think you don't know yet. I think that's all it is, and so that's great. That you don't know right now, and so at least we can gear where we have to go.
Yeah.
And so going native is a big thing. Organic is really taking off. And
Composting too, huh?
yeah.
Composting.
And I mean, composting is great. You're not creating any waste. That's also, education wise is I want to myself, selfishly, I want to not have to use my trash can.
Yeah.
I would like to be able to reuse everything in my house, compost the food. I really don't know why it's going in trash, even if it's a place that's incinerating it. Food waste and incinerators kind of brings down the quality that they're getting in there. So yes, composting on site is going to make your soil so much better. It's going to create beneficial like relationships in your soil. And you don't need a compost bin. That's really cool. There's 3-stage compost bins. They're big. It's really impressive. But if I'm a home of 2 people, I really don't need that to take up half of my small yard. Composting bins are also really neat. I mean, I do have those. I like composting. That's the thing though. So I have 3 really big composters outside. You don't need those. Some of them, I get them all, almost for free. You find people who are selling them $20-$30, but new ones will be like $90, $100. And gardening can seem overwhelming because it can seem expensive to get started, and it can seem like there's a lot going on. But composting, for example, can be as simple as digging a hole. I mean, dig a good hole. Don't just move the soil. Digging the hole, popping your food in there and covering it up. Sometimes people are worried about animals coming in, and I agree. I haven't had that issue, but if that's the case, go ahead and put like a paver, like a stepping stone over it. I mean, that's a very hungry animal. If you move the paver to dig, to dig through the hole to get to your food scraps. There's also, with composting, because that is popular, I just want to jump in with some ideas. If you can find an old blender or one you don't want, you can cut up your banana pieces, maybe some carrot pieces, and basically you blend it into like almost like a smoothie, like a puree.
Oh yeah.
Dig your hole, go ahead and put that in. It's going to dissipate into the soil much faster, and it's already much more broken down, really saving you the time. You don't have to worry about forgetting in a week and digging a hole for your plant and having like food scraps. You can just go ahead and,
how deep would you have to dig?
I mean, you're not going a foot, but the thing is, I try to go at least like a hand, that's a good little visual. So your food's not sitting where when the rain comes and it moves that soil, your food
starts coming.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So composting, you're right, is a very big one. Native and organic, I think those are the big ones. And just in general, gardening during the pandemic took off. Seed companies had some of their biggest sales in the history of being around. And I think a lot of people appreciated having a hobby that they could do outdoors, or having a food security.
And seeing their food, like seeing and knowing how does it grow? Where does it come from? These are things we don't have to think about. We're lucky. It's not
the potatoes. I didn't know that before. I was like, you got your white potatoes, you got sweet potatoes. They're kind of like orangey.
Yes.
There's purple potatoes, and like there's red carrots. And I mean, you see that, but for all I don't know, for all it's dyed, or you just don't put into thought about how you got these carrots.
They naturally happen like that. Yeah. It's amazing. It's really amazing. The other thing that I had seen was rain barrels, like water harvesting. That's also another trend that I've been seeing, and trying to, use the rain to water the plants and keep some water. Not up my alley yet. I went to a few classes, and I'm very interested. But again, I'm on a second floor condo apartment.
You're limited on that. But I do have, this is again, years and years of this being like my passion. This being
Mm.
what encouraged me to go back to school and finish my education. So I say that to say my knowledge, take it with a grain of salt.
It's all right. It's okay. Keep going with it.
And so my knowledge, I would take that with a grain of salt when I say these things, because it doesn't have to start there. So I guess I'll make it easy. I started with just putting 5-gallon buckets out in the rain, and I would look at my house, and the areas that got the most water coming off the roof, I would put the buckets there. And,
Yeah.
they wouldn't all fill up. I mean, certain months of the year, especially in Florida, it's not filling up unless it's a rainstorm. And then I would get my buckets and I'd start putting them all into one. And then I would water my little starter plants with that, or my house plants. And, there's research about not collecting your roof water. And that makes sense. If you're getting kind of dirt and pollen on there, it's not like that's pure water. I'm not drinking it. And it's going to be the same water they would have gotten anyway. So it's based on
Yeah. If you
how you
left the
see
plants
that, how you
out
look
and
at that
stuff like
data.
that. Mm-hmm.
That grew into me putting rain gutters on just a small section of the house. I still don't know how to put up rain gutters. So it's not like I learned in the process, but being able to do a small project that then gives me a collected amount of water that was greater than me doing my buckets helps. And I'm not going outside, putting my buckets and, putting them all together. So it's like a 10-foot piece of the roof that has a rain gutter. And that went into a downspout that seemed really easy. And it was just collecting into a rain barrel.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of cities will do rain barrel events where they provide
Yes.
you everything you need. They give you a workshop. You don't complete it there. And that was my hard part. I was like, cool, I have the spigot. How do I get it into it? I was like, can you cut it before I walk away? Or, do you have the tool? I don't know. Which really, what I did is I heated up a knife. That's what I ended up doing. I heated up a knife. I overcut the hole. So when you put the spigot, I had water leaking, but it's okay. You just get some sealant, it could be ugly. It just needs to work.
Yeah. No, I think it's so important what you're saying, because I think it can seem overwhelming. Anything that maybe at this time when it's environmentally friendly, everyone goes, oh, it's going to be a lot of work, or it's going to be a lot of money. Exactly. So I think what you're saying is so important, that it's just a little bit. Like I could just literally put a bucket outside, get some water. I can do one little bucket of compost, one small thing. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's what I would love for our community, for our listeners to know, is that, you're not starting from a place where you're already educated in here, and that there's resources available to us to begin to do that. And just even from my experience with you and then my own personal experience, how much being in a part of a community garden has helped me to learn to understand plants and the way that I see things, and begin to make small changes, for myself and at home. And now I have a few herbs and things that I'm growing inside the house. And then I found 2 little spots outside that nobody has complained about, that I'm putting outside plants.
I know. When I lived in apartments, I had a preserve behind me. I didn't have anywhere to compost, so I would I looked around. It's not like I was proud of it. I was like, well, let me make sure no one's looking at me. Go to the preserve, dig your little hole. I put my compost in there. I was like, I'm helping the world as I dug it. I'm like, this is not going to landfill. It's okay. And definitely, I'm telling you, I started gardening and I would use friends' yards. I understand if you're an introvert, but if you've got family who has it, they'll usually end up being so happy that you brought life to this corner that had nothing before, especially when they start seeing that it could produce food, and it's food that they were paying money for. Herbs grow pretty quickly. And if you're someone who's cooking, you're going to go through those really fast. A little is more than nothing.
Exactly. Star, I am so, so thankful for you to come on to the show. And I know that you just completed your degree in environmental policy. And so I'm waiting for when that book comes out. We'd love to have you back on the show.
Yeah, let you know when I'm on the ballot somewhere.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks again for spending some time with us and giving us some valuable knowledge as we all start thinking about, growing our own plants and foods and contributing in the community. So thank you.
Always a pleasure. Yes, thank you. Go out and make the world a better place.